I've worked overnight security for nearly 7 years, and I've learned that most shifts are painfully boring. You patrol the same hallways, check the same doors, and spend hours staring at camera screens waiting for something to happen. Usually nothing ever does. About a year ago, my company assigned me to a newly built data center outside Columbus, Ohio. The facility sat at the end of a long access road surrounded by empty farmland. It was heavily secured, double fencing, dozens of cameras, and electronic badge readers on nearly every interior door. Once the late shift engineers left around 8 at night, I was usually the only person on the property until 6 in the morning. My job was straightforward. Every hour, I'd walk the building to scan physical checkpoints with a handheld device, then return to the security desk to monitor roughly 80 live feeds. One dedicated monitor displayed our access control software, logging every badge scan in real time. Whenever someone used a card, their name, employee ID, and location would instantly populate the screen. On a Tuesday night around 2:40 in the morning, the system chimed. North Mechanical Corridor. Access granted. I looked up, confused. Nobody was scheduled to be on site. I opened the live access log, expecting to see an off-hours engineer or a third-party technician, but the entry was strange. The username field was totally blank, and under the badge ID column, it simply read, Authorized Access. I immediately switched the main monitor to the North Mechanical camera. The magnetic lock clicked, and the heavy steel door slowly swung open into the hallway. No one was standing there. The door stayed open for about 3 seconds, swung closed, and the lock re-engaged. I sat there for a moment, replaying the camera footage. I zoomed in on the timestamp to see if the feed had dropped or skipped frames, but the seconds ticked by smoothly. The corridor was completely empty the entire time. Wanting to be thorough, I grabbed my flashlight and walked down to the mechanical corridor. I checked the physical door, pulling on the handle to confirm the maglock was fully engaged. It was secured. I scanned my own badge to test the reader. It beeped, logged my full name on the system, and unlocked normally. I checked the maintenance logs on the terminal, but there were no pending updates or reported faults for that zone. Assuming it was just a localized software glitch, I wrote up a routine incident report and finished my shift. The next night, at exactly 2:40 a.m., the console chimed again. North Mechanical Corridor. Access granted. I pulled up the feed immediately. The same door unlocked and opened into the empty hallway. But 30 seconds later, a second chime sounded. Server Room B, outer vestibule. Access granted. That room was further down the same corridor. On the monitor, the vestibule door unlatched and opened, exactly as if someone had just walked up to it and swiped a card. Again, both camera feeds showed absolute nothingness. I immediately called my supervisor, Mark. I explained the situation calmly, focusing on the system logs and the lack of user credentials. He sounded skeptical, suggesting it was probably database corruption, network latency, or perhaps an automated maintenance script running out of the main corporate office. Still, given that it involved a server room vestibule, he drove out to the site to inspect the system himself. Mark arrived around 3:30 a.m. Together, we spent the next hour cross-referencing the access logs, checking server synchronization, and reviewing camera footage from previous shifts to see if this had happened during the day. Everything else in the system was running normally. Then, at 4:12 a.m., while we were both standing right at the console, the alarm chimed a third time. Loading dock corridor, access granted. Mark leaned over my shoulder, watching the dock camera. The heavy double doors unlatched. The camera caught the physical movement of the door pushing open, but the space between the frames remained empty. A second later, a secondary sensor triggered. Loading dock exterior exit, door open. Grab your gear, Mark said quietly. His tone had completely changed. The nonchalance was gone. We ran down the stairs and turned the corner toward the loading dock. The heavy steel exit door was resting on its latch, unsealed. We pulled our flashlights, stepped out onto the concrete pad, and searched the immediate perimeter. There was nothing. No vehicle engines in the distance, no footsteps on the gravel, no lingering motion, just the quiet rustle of the wind blowing across the open fields. Mark called the local police to report a potential perimeter breach. 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later and conducted a full walkthrough of the facility and the outer fence line. They checked every dark corner, the mechanical rooms, and the perimeter wire. They found absolutely nothing. No broken locks, no forced entries, no signs that anyone had been inside the building at all. By the end of the week, corporate took action. They didn't make a big announcement, but a specialized IT security team arrived on site. Over the course of 3 days, they replaced every single badge reader in the facility, wiped the local access control database, and reissued brand new physical credentials to every employee on the roster. After that overhaul, the phantom access alerts stopped completely. About 6 months later, I was at the regional headquarters for annual training and bumped into one of the corporate security managers who had overseen the audit. We made small talk about the Columbus facility, and I eventually brought up that night. "Did you guys ever figure out what was causing those ghost reads on the mechanical doors?" I asked casually. "Was it a bad panel?" The manager paused, holding his coffee cup, and looked at me for a second before answering. His demeanor shifted, becoming noticeably guarded. "We identified the credential that generated those access events," he said carefully. "Really?" I asked. "Whose card was it?" He hesitated, tapping his fingers against the cup, clearly weighing how much he should say. "The investigation was closed at the executive level," he replied flatly. "It wasn't assigned to anyone currently working for the company, and I'm really not supposed to discuss the details." He gave a brief polite nod, turned around, and walked back toward his office. He didn't mention a glitch. He didn't mention a corrupted file. He specifically said credential. I still work overnight security. I still patrol empty corridors, check locks, and watch dozens of camera feeds on quiet shifts. But whenever I'm sitting in a dark control room and hear a badge reader unlock a door somewhere deep inside an empty building, I don't automatically assume it's a system error anymore. I check the camera first, every single time. I spent almost 5 years working overnight security at a 12-story office building in downtown Dallas. It wasn't a dangerous assignment. Most of the tenants were corporate law firms and accounting offices, so once everyone left around 7 p.m., the property stayed empty until early morning. There were 2 guards during the day, but after midnight I worked alone. My job was straightforward: monitor the camera wall, patrol every floor on the hour, and check in with off-site dispatch. One Friday night around 1:30 a.m., I was sitting at the security console when the primary monitor flickered. Camera 18, which covered the 9th floor west corridor, switched on its own to the 4th floor elevator lobby, an area I had finished patrolling 20 minutes prior. A moment later, camera 12 shifted to the basement corridor. I didn't panic. The system ran on a legacy software build, and micro stutters weren't unheard of. I pulled up the system diagnostics, assuming a sequence cycle had been triggered by mistake. The console showed no active patrol loops running. Methodically, I checked the workstation event log. The system registered an active local user session, mine, but the command logs for those specific camera selections were missing entirely. I checked the network management tab to see if another user had logged into the CCTV client remotely. The active connections list showed only one IP, the local host desk where I was sitting. I closed the software, verified the server connection ping, and relaunched the interface. The feeds stabilized back to the default grid. At 2 a.m., I locked the console and began my standard sweep. Everything was quiet until I reached the 9th floor. At the end of the east hallway, Suite 904 was standing slightly open. I knew for a fact I had locked that suite during my midnight walk. I physically checked every latch. I unholstered my flashlight, pushed the door back, and swept the room. The cubicles were empty. The perimeter windows were locked from the inside, and nothing on the desks appeared out of place. As I stepped back into the corridor to secure the door, my radio crackled. Dispatch asked if I was conducting a walk on 8, as they had just flagged consecutive motion alerts in the south hallway. I was standing directly above that floor. Instead of waiting for the elevator, I took the fire stairs down to 8. The floor was pitch black except for the green exit signs. Flashlight in hand, I checked every office door, the break room, and the utility closets. Nothing. While walking back toward the stairwell, I paused. From 2 floors below, I heard the subtle, heavy click of a fire door latching back into its frame. I went down the stairs 2 at a time, checking 7, 6, and 5. Every door was shut tightly. When I got back down to the lobby control room, I stopped in the doorway. The camera software was running again. I had logged off before leaving the desk. I walked over and checked the active focus window. Camera 22 was selected, the exact 8th floor corridor I had walked out of less than 2 minutes earlier. The live feed was delayed by roughly 4 seconds, displaying a view of the dark hallway just as my flashlight beam had faded from it. I pulled up the system log again. No local input had been recorded on the mouse or keyboard while I was away. Yet, someone was selecting camera feeds in direct relation to where I was moving in the building. I called my field supervisor immediately and reported a breach. He told me to lock the lobby doors, step outside, and wait for law enforcement. 2 Dallas patrol officers arrived 10 minutes later. Together, we conducted a systematic sweep of all 12 floors, the basement, and the parking garage. We found no open exterior doors, no broken windows, and no unauthorized personnel anywhere on the site. The following morning, corporate IT sent a senior network manager, along with a forensic technician, to inspect the CCTV infrastructure. They traced the signal routing back to the 2nd floor main server room, a room that required a master keycard to access. When they opened the primary network cabinet, they found an unauthorized micro router spliced directly into the master video encoder switchboard. It had its own isolated power feed and a high-gain cellular module. The technician explained that the device didn't just mirror the feeds. It allowed someone outside the network to inject commands, toggle camera views, and monitor live video feeds remotely without triggering standard local user logs. It required advanced technical knowledge to build and physically integrate into that specific board. Police took the hardware as evidence. They never determined who fabricated the device, how long it had been connected inside that cabinet, or why that specific office building was targeted. I resigned from that property a few weeks later, though I stayed in the security field. I still work the overnight shift, and whenever I sit in a quiet guard room in front of a wall of camera feeds, I never assume I'm the only one watching them. I worked as a mobile security officer for a private company just outside Nashville, Tennessee. Instead of staying at one property all night, I drove between several locations, checking alarms, locking gates, and making sure everything was secure before morning shift started. One of my regular stops was a newly built distribution warehouse about 20 minutes outside the city. It sat by itself in an industrial park that was still mostly empty fields. After midnight, there wasn't another person around for miles. My shift usually brought me there around 3 a.m. I'd unlock the main gate, drive a slow lap around the building, check the loading docks, and then do a quick interior patrol. For almost 6 months, every single visit was identical. Then, on a cold Thursday morning, that changed. As I pulled up to the property, the gate was locked as usual, but as my headlights swept across the building, I noticed something off. One of the loading dock doors was raised about a foot off the ground, just enough for a person to crawl underneath. I parked nearby and called dispatch to see if an alarm had been triggered. Nothing, the dispatcher told me. No motion alerts, no perimeter breaches. She asked if I wanted her to send local police. Now, on paper, a guard is supposed to treat every anomaly like an emergency, but in reality, dock doors on new buildings malfunction constantly. Sensor faults, misaligned tracks, or even maintenance crews leaving a bay cracked to air the place out happen all the time. Calling the police meant bringing 2 county deputies out to a remote location for what was almost certainly a mechanical glitch. So I told dispatch I'd verify the door first. Looking back, that decision was a mistake. I ducked under the partially open dock door and stepped inside. The warehouse was pitch black, except for a few dim emergency lights scattered high on the ceiling. Thousands of tall metal storage racks stretched out in long, endless rows. Every tiny sound echoed. I walked toward the wall control panel to lower the door electronically. Before I reached it, the metal dock door slammed down behind me. The crash hit like a gunshot in the empty space. I spun around and ran back, grabbing the handle and pulling with everything I had. It wouldn't budge. Someone on the outside had jammed a heavy steel pin through the manual track latch. I grabbed my radio to call for help. "Dispatch, I'm locked inside the dock area." The signal immediately died into harsh static. The warehouse walls were made of thick reinforced concrete, and radio reception inside had always been terrible. I pulled out my phone. 0 bars. Trying to keep my breathing steady, I hurried down the outer wall toward the nearest emergency exit. I slammed my hands against the push bar. It barely moved. When I looked closer, I realized why. A heavy chain had been looped through the interior handle and padlocked around an iron support beam. I ran to the next exit down the wall. Same thing. A wooden timber had been wedged tightly beneath the bar, wedging it shut. Whoever was in here hadn't just broken in. They had systematically modified the building's exits to seal off the perimeter. That's when I heard it. A low, deep rumble from deep inside the aisles. A forklift engine. It was idling. Then, the engine revved, and the machine began to move, slowly. The acoustics of the massive concrete room made it impossible to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. It echoed off the ceiling, making it sound like it was right in front of me. Then, suddenly behind me, twin beams of yellow headlights cut through the darkness 50 yards away. They didn't move fast, and they weren't driving in a straight line. The driver was slowly crawling down the cross aisles, pausing at the end of each row, using the height of the forklift lights to sweep the space. It wasn't being used as a weapon. It was being used as a searchlight. I dropped to my knees and crawled behind a dense stack of wooden pallets, pressing my back against the wood. The engine noise grew deafening as the headlights swept past my row. Then, the forklift stopped. The engine kept idling, vibrating the concrete floor beneath me. For 10 suffocating seconds, everything was still. Then came the sound of a heavy metal seat springing up, followed by boots hitting the concrete. Footsteps. Not running, just a calm, deliberate walking pace. The driver wasn't trying to hide his footsteps anymore. He didn't need to. He knew I was trapped in the room with him, and he was methodically checking the dark corners on foot. I waited until the footsteps moved further down the main aisle, then slipped out from behind the pallets and moved silently in the opposite direction, hugging the dark shadows of the outer wall. Near the shipping office, I finally found a third fire exit. My heart stopped for a second as I reached for the bar, but this one hadn't been blocked yet. I threw my weight against it. The door burst open into the cool night air, set off the local alarm horn, and I sprinted across the asphalt toward my patrol truck. As I reached the driver's side door, I turned around. A man wearing dark work clothing and a face mask was standing in the open doorway, lit from behind by the warehouse emergency lights. He didn't chase me. He didn't yell. He just stood there, watching me get into my truck. The police arrived about 12 minutes later. They searched the building top to bottom. The forklift was left idling in the middle of a main aisle. The man was gone, having slipped out the same fire exit I used, vanishing into the surrounding empty fields before officers could set up a perimeter. During the investigation, police found 3 full pallets of high-value electronics staged right next to the open dock door, clearly prepared for quick loading into a getaway vehicle. Investigators concluded that the suspect had likely been watching the facility and my routine for weeks. He knew the precise window between my nightly visits, knew the radio dead zones inside the concrete structure, and knew he had just enough time to stage the theft. When I showed up early and caught him mid-job, locking me inside wasn't a random act of panic. It was a calculated move to buy himself time to finish or escape without being followed. I still work as a security officer today. Component checks, site visits, and lockups are still part of my daily job. But if I ever arrive at a property now and find a dock door even slightly out of place, I don't step inside to check it. I pull off the property, park by the main road, and wait in my vehicle until a second unit arrives. No matter how routine the call seems,